for being here. I'm Robin. I'm the program manager for the WCWB. And thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Let's Talk Business with John Biethan, the president and producer of Imagine Podcasting, and creative director Sam Santo. Today's episode is how to create long-lasting, trusted relationships with podcasting. And so just in a moment, I'll hand it off to our guest. But I always start with a few housekeeping items and an overview of the resources that the WCWB has to offer. So bear with me if you've sat through this one before. But if you haven't already, please go ahead and mute yourself for now. If you're having any issues with your audio, you can always call in. And if you have questions, you can use the chat function. At the end, we'll have some time for Q&A where you can then unmute yourself and also utilize the chat. This webinar is being recorded. That's always my cue to hit record. Oh, we are already recording from John. And it will also be uploaded to our Let's Talk Business library, where you can find other presentations on various topics of interest. The WCWB hosts 2 Let's Talk Business episodes a month. One's on the first Thursday and one's on the third Thursday, always at noon to 1. Among some of our many amazing resources for entrepreneurs at the WCWB, we offer a business plan writing program called BEST. So if you're interested in starting your own business, our business enterprise startup training might be the perfect option for you as you begin your entrepreneurship journey. BEST is an 8-week course with 1 webinar per week, and you'll receive access to a business plan web application that you'll use to create a comprehensive business plan. So if you plan to seek small business loans to fund your startup, having a business plan is crucial. And in BEST, you'll be supported from the beginning to the end, step by step. The WCWB also offers no-cost business coaching. Coaching sessions can be over the phone or Zoom and eventually back in person, and topics include startup assistance, business plan writing, marketing, operations, and we also have a CPA coach who's a great resource for anything financially related. The WCWB is located in the Thurston EDC and CBNI, which is in the SPSCC Lacey campus. And at the Thurston EDC, we have a number of partner organizations that assist entrepreneurs and business owners at various stages and aspects of business. The SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, provides free business counseling to organizations. They're usually working with those who have already started or in early stages of business development. And the Washington Procurement Technical Assistance Center, or PTAC, helps organizations to contract with city, state, and federal governments. So if you think that you have a product or a service that can be sold to a government entity, PTAC can help you find and pursue those contracts. And we offer a SCORE mentorship program. So this is a no-cost program that is typically provided by volunteering retired business individuals. Those volunteers are helping early on businesses and entrepreneurs. And then we also have our own version of Shark Tank called Think. It's a group of 40 local investors who are interested in investing in local Washington businesses. So if you've seen Shark Tank before, it's a very similar concept. The business comes in and pitches their idea to the investors, who in return ask difficult questions. And Think is typically looking for businesses that will have high growth potential. And then located over at St. Martin's is the Lacey Makerspace. We like to call it an inventor's workshop. You can go and create prototypes, but you can also just go in to get creative. You'll have access to tools that you might not have access to otherwise. You can check out their website for daily drop-ins or annual memberships. And if you're interested in pursuing more of our services, you can check out our calendar to see upcoming programs. Don't forget that our annual Women's Business Conference is just around the corner on May 18th at 1 p.m. So if you visit inspireconference.org, you can check out our panel speakers, our keynote, and the agenda, and then also get tickets. And for more information about what the WCWB offers, you can email us, give us a phone call, or visit the website. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome John and Sam. Thanks so much for being here.
Robin, thanks for having us. So your screen is still there, and that's fine. And I just want to introduce myself. My name is John Biethan, president of Imagine Podcasting. And my partner, really, Sam DeSanto here is as well. Let me share my screen. Hang on just a minute, because can everybody see that? And do I sound marvelous?
Yep.
That's good. So, given the number of people here, I am totally fine with the idea of actually taking questions midstream. Okay. So, one thing I wanted to tell you guys, I actually created this for this session, and I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, and being from the Northwest, I kind of know what the skies are like in the winter this time of year. Thus, the background of this presentation is actually in kind of a light gray. I just wanted to make you feel at home. So we'll just get started here. And the first thing I want to do is that I hold relationship at the top of my list in terms of how I roll in life. I don't know anything that you might be involved in that doesn't require to be engaged in relationship. And it's just really, really at the top of my list. So I really wanted to give a shout out to Mary Kravitz. She has a networking group called Watch Us Thrive, where I met Anna Reed from Call Me Unstoppable. And we were in a breakout room, and it was fabulous. We had a great conversation. I immediately invited her onto one of my podcasts with her sister, Anna. So that turned into, I think, was it Logan that reached out to you, Robin?
Yeah, it was Logan.
Yeah. So I am quite honored to be here. I mean, I really am. And then I also wanted to thank Sam DeSanto. He is our creative director at Imagine Podcasting, and he has his own business along with his wife, Gunella DeSanto, and it's S&G Studios. Highly recommend you go visit them. And I'm going to say something that Sam and Gunella do not tell people, but I think you would like to hear, which is they were largely responsible for the rebrand of the Sci-Fi Channel a couple of years ago. And the reason I mention it is because you don't get to that place unless you know how to tell a story. And really, podcasting is all about storytelling, which Sam's going to have two pieces in the presentation, and you'll learn more about that. So these are some of the questions, and feel free to unmute yourself. So I'm sort of curious if anybody here is actually podcasting right now. Anybody?
I've been on podcasts and I've been thinking about podcasting, but I don't have a podcast.
Uh-huh. Well, you know, for those people that don't feel like they have the time or whatever to start a podcast, getting on a podcast is wonderful. And in fact, I have an associate, Honoré Corder, and she's a book author and also a book publishing strategist. And I met her once again, well, in a networking group, and had her on my podcast. And at some point I just asked her, Honoré, have you ever thought about starting a podcast? She goes, I don't need to. And I said, how come? She says, I've been on 500 podcasts. And then I later even asked her regarding her success, because she's written 53 books and sold, I think, 4 million plus copies of her books and done really, really well. But she attributes her success to continuing to writing and continuing to be on other people's podcasts. So if you think you don't need to be on a podcast, or you may be wrong just because there's so many people now doing it. So generally speaking, how do people feel about podcasting? And you could like stick it in the chat if you wanted to, or not. Anne says, not sure. Robin loves podcasts. Of course you do. Anne's excited. And the other Sam love podcasts. That's great. So actually, I really would love to know how we can serve you best today. We do have a 35 slide presentation, which we're going to go through pretty quick. But what is it that, just chime out there anyway, whether it's chat or unmute yourself, and just let us know what you most want to know today. How can we best serve you? The talking part isn't hard. The tech part feels scary. I was actually going to put in a scary slide. I decided not to. How does one get started? What equipment is needed? We're going to cover that. All right. So the fact is, you can podcast. And one of our elevator speeches is that we're hired by people basically that keep putting off starting their podcast because it seems complicated and expensive. And of course, what people really want is to start a profitable podcast and get their brand and message out there in a much, much bigger way. So we're going to do the best we can. So this is the journey today. We're going to talk about why podcast. Sam's going to go over that. I'm going to go over the history of podcasting, which is really a lot of fun. And then we'll go over the whole thing about, does it seem complicated and expensive, and address those issues, the equipment, the software, and then just working towards a successful podcast, what that really looks like and what it means. And what does success for you look like? And I've learned over time that success means very different things for everybody. And then podcast brand discovery process, which is something that we have perfected, and that's headed up by Sam Santo. Sam's like wonderful. And then we're going to talk about one of our current clients that's getting ready to release her podcast and why she started her podcast. Does that sound good? Sam, the ball is in your court. You may unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm unmuted. So thank you very much. Well, first of all, it is wonderful to be here. So thanks for having us. It's great fun. And I won't bore you, I promise, but I have to tell you a quick story just to set up a little backstory. So John and I met over a year ago at a networking thing. And at the time, he was getting ready to, he was in the early stages of thinking about launching his website or redoing his website. And so he came to our networking thing, and my title in the networking group is writer. Right now, I do a lot of different creative stuff, but you got to stay in your lane. And so my job there is as writer. And he happened to come on a day when I was presenting. So I had a presentation like this, and I was talking about pathos, right? And writing, and how in a website, we need to connect emotionally, and how do we do that? And it's all about pathos, and everybody thought pathos meant drama and heartbreak, and it does, but it also means connecting, and it also means like telling stories, right? So a couple of months later, he's like, all right, I'm ready to pull the trigger. Let me call Sam. And he calls me. Oh, yeah, I remember you. That's great. And he said, okay, I want to talk about podcasting. And I'm like, oh, terrific. I put on a smile. He hangs up. I'm like, I don't know anything about podcasting, right? So I got to figure out, like, what am I going to do? Because I want to, obviously I want the gig, right? And he's a cool guy and I want it to work out. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do? So by serendipity, because I'm a TV guy, movie guy, right? That's my passion. And a buddy of mine, literally that week, had sent me a podcast that had just started. I was like, okay, whatever this is. And it was a podcast about movie scores, right? It's called The Art of the Score. And it's this amazing thing where, the first episode was about John Williams, right? And about Raiders and Indiana Jones music. And I'm like, oh, I'm in my zone. So I listened to this thing. And all of a sudden I have this experience, right? Where, okay, it's intimate, right? And I'm listening to it for a long period of time, and I'm engrossed in it, right? And it's personal because the podcast is all by these guys who are composers. They're not named guys, but they're composers. So they're talking from a point of passion, right? And I'm listening to this thing, and time is flying by. And I'm like, and I'm transported, right? Because it's like we're listening to the music. I think about the movie that they're playing music from, and it's just this amazing. And then at the end, there's this ad. I didn't even know it was an ad, right? Because it was just not intrusive. And so anyway, you put all that together. And what I wound up doing was, to do my homework, I put a document together, okay, for John with these sort of observations, because it was new to me. And I said, all right, well, look, I'll send him the document. If he likes it, okay. If not, I tried and it's no big deal. But it turns out the document, he loved it, right? And it turned out to be sort of the cornerstone of our relationship and how we now proceed to help others in the podcasting space. So I know my slide here says podcasting as it relates to people. So I kind of talked about that, but again, people listen, podcasts they can be quick, but they can also be long. and it's intimate no matter what. And it's very pleasurable also, I think, to be able to listen and not be bombarded with visual commercials and like visual interrupters, right? So if you're doing something and let's say you're making dinner, you can listen while you're doing that. If you're driving, you can drive and listen. So it's not like it doesn't occupy your entire vision, right? Because it's audio. So that's really helpful. But I find it personal, transportive, right? The ads weren't intrusive. And then I thought about, okay, well, that's great for me listening to soundtracks. So what? What about businesses, right? And I was thinking, well, if these guys were selling something, like what would that process be? And especially in this year of COVID, I've also thought about like, okay, why is it the perfect thing for now and moving forward? So if I have something to sell or I have a skill set or whatever, a podcast will help me to demonstrate that, right? Because we'll be talking about it every day. And as you can tell, I like to talk, right? So the more I talk, the more you'll learn from what I have to say, or the more you'll be exposed to what I have to say. And most of it's good. Some of it's not, but most of it's great, right? So, and the other thing is that as listeners, okay, you can hit so many different people so easily, right? And you can meet new groups of people, and it's just online. So it's not like anyone has to travel or book flights or get a convention stage or any of that kind of stuff, or catering. I mean, all that stuff we used to have to do to talk to 500 people at once. And now, boom, you can do it on a podcast and you haven't had to pay for anything, right? So that's amazing. And then this is, for me personally, the thing. You wouldn't believe it, right? Because I'm carrying on now, but there is a public speaking component to this that freaks a lot of people out because eyeballs are on you, right? So podcasting allows you to express yourself and talk about all these great things about your business without a convention room of eyeballs on you, which could easily freeze you up, right? So once you get used to talking in the microphone and you get your space, all of a sudden, you can loosen up and actually say what you have to say. So, and the last thing down there says takeaway. So when you're in the podcast zone and you're talking about your business, it's, and as I said, I believe it's an amazing new way to reach people and reach a lot of people and reach them very quickly, right? The other thing is, when I look at this mic, you can't see my mic, but it's this little thing and it carries a big punch, right? So it's portable, it's, adaptable, right? Because you can do it on the go. You can set your room up in your office, whatever you want to do. But it's intimate too. And that's the other thing that's always great. So, and my last thing, and I hope all of this makes sense, but my last point is if you have a story worth telling, right? If you really have a passion for what you're talking about and you have a story worth telling and you can provide people with a quality listening experience, right? So that it doesn't sound like you're in a tin can someplace, right? And that your voice sounds warm and all that sort of stuff. And if the segments that you create really are from the heart and they're intimate, right? And they're purposeful, I think you put all that together and people will really respond to that. And once they respond to it, they'll stick with you. And if they stick with you over time, they really will build that trusted experience that John had mentioned, because it does take time. Like we just met, right? But maybe, oh, all right, they sound like they sound like nice guys. I'll take a listen to the thing in the link or what have you, right? So people have speed bumps, and if you can get them over those first speed bumps, they'll stick with you. So I hope that gives you kind of a reasonable sort of overview of how this can become such a passion, right? Because podcasters and people in podcasting, I didn't know about it, but now I'm really excited about it because it's just, once you get in there, all of a sudden it just opens. It opens and opens, and the potentials of it really do open up. So anyway, that's my particular point of view, and I hope you find that helpful.
Every time I hear you talk, it's always helpful, Sam. Thank you. So I want to remind people right on the slide, it's like, get the document, Why We Podcast. It's a single page. And you can get it at imaginepodcasting.com. And on the top left, there's Why We Podcast. Click on it. Yes, it's an opt-in. And you'll have to, basically get an email to confirm your subscription, and the document will be right there. And trust me, I can't stand getting like 2-3 emails a day from the same people. So we don't do a whole lot of email marketing. I just find it to be somewhat distractive as well. So the other thing I wanted to mention regarding what Sam was talking about is it's really important to understand you don't need 10,000 listeners. You don't need 100,000. You don't need 1,000. You don't even need 500. Simply ask yourself the question, if you only had 200 people listening to you every single week, when is the last time you were in front of 200 people every single week? So that's, to me, and you know, you can do it in your bathrobe. What can I say? It's pretty cool. All right, so I'll move on here. So we're going to go through the history of podcasting pretty quick. So here's the great thing. And why is the Gutenberg Press sitting there? Well, it's sitting there because before the Gutenberg Press, when it came to writing, people could not publish their own material. And it actually took 100 years after the Gutenberg Press came out before people really started actually publishing. But it was a game changer. It was disruptive. It's what we talk today. So I consider podcasting to be the same. And I'll go through a little bit about why I got excited. But, you know, I did have a client that was spending a half an hour radio show on Saturday mornings in Albuquerque, spending $20,000 a year for that spot. And if something bigger was happening in town, they got bumped. $20,000 a year. So you can actually do podcasting for a couple $100 a year if you want. So it was started by two guys, really, and the top guy is Dave Weiner. I don't know if anybody knows who Dave Weiner is, but he is credited with creating what's called the RSS2 specification, which allowed essentially embedding of content into a feed, an RSS feed, so you could click on a link and actually go listen to a podcast, read a PDF, something like that. The guy on the bottom, I don't know if you recognize him, but his name's Adam Curry. He was the first V jockey for MTV. I don't know if, does anybody remember that? So he was the big hair guy and the first video disc jockey. And a little side story is that he discovered that you could register a domain when he was way back in MTV days. And he actually registered mtv.com and didn't tell anybody. And then at some point he left MTV and the internet happened. And MTV found out they wanted to grab it and it was registered in his name. It ended up in court and Adam Curry won. And of course, MTV said, all right, how much do you want for it? And I think it was like $2 million, something like that. Well, that set Adam Curry up on a trajectory of creating a podcast called The Daily Source Code. And he moved to England and kind of the rest is history. So, but it's Dave Weiner that really is the guy that really technically kind of created the whole thing. So here's kind of what the RSS feed looks like. It kind of looks like the Matrix. And I'll show you here in a minute what I mean by that. But I'll just keep going. So this is actually a picture of what a textual RSS feed looks like. And you guys are going, I don't really care. I just want a podcast. But it's just kind of fun because back in the day, you know, podcasting actually started in 2005, which I'll show you in a minute. But it was actually created with Weiner in 2004. And back then, I had to write this to make my podcast happen because there was no technology to actually write a podcast feed to make the whole thing happen. So here's what was happened back in 2004. I'm sitting in front of my computer in Netscape and I look at code like this. And I notice at the top, you can see a reference to an MP3 file. And I went, what's that? And this isn't the original, but I copied that and I started listening to this audio file. And this guy named Dave Weiner was sitting in a cafe having breakfast with his good buddy in Florida. And it starts out with him saying, do you mind if I record this? And I felt like I was like a bug on the wall listening to these guys talk. And it was a fascinating conversation. And that's what got me really excited about podcasting. So we are going to break down what it is and how it works. And bear with me, getting this to work and flawlessly so you can see it is a little bit of a hoop for me to get through. But this was created by Craig Severson, and I think in 2007-8. There's been nothing better that I've ever seen that really explained how a podcast works and what it is. So we'll just start right here.
From the Silicon Valley in California, welcome to the inaugural program of Podcast.
Can you hear it?
So what's a podcast? Oh, glad you asked. And if you're familiar with the other shows in the Grunt series, you know we're going to start with the basics.
We can't hear it anymore.
Yeah, there's no sound.
There's no sound at all?
There was, and then it faded out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it got kind of warbly, blue, 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 and then it just disappeared.
Oh, really? Well, that's not good. Tell me if you can hear it now.
Nope.
No? Well, boy, little breakdown here, huh? Hang on just a minute. Let me change something. This is not what we want to hear on a... Tell me if you hear it now.
Go radio or television show.
There we go.
It's pre-recorded and lives on your computer so you can look at it anytime. And one of the other cool things about
I can hear it.
is that this new method of distribution is so efficient that it allows most anyone with a good idea and some reasonable talent to make a show about something that they have passion for. And because they're unfettered by time or content constraints like a traditional broadcaster would, you can get some really interesting programs that never would have been possible to get before. So we're going to go over the basic mechanism of how a podcast works so you can see how simple and unthreatening it really is. Here's an example. Let's say there's this guy named Joe, and he has this idea for a weekly show about marmalade, because he likes it. And he decides to call it The Joe Show. In his home studio, Joe records 2 initial episodes to get started. With these 2, he feels ready to go public and launch the Joe Show podcast. To do this, he signs up with Acme Web Hosting and uploads his first 2 episode files. And because he's creating a podcast, a special file is also created that keeps a running tab on the episodes and contains basic information about the Joe Show podcast itself.
That's the RSS
We'll
feed.
talk more about this file down the road, but for today, let's call it the control file. Now, let's say you've got a penchant for marmalade yourself, and you've heard about the Joe Show from a friend. From your computer, you launch a podcatcher application like iTunes and ask it to subscribe to the Joe Show. Your computer sends a message to that control file to see if there are any new shows there. And since this is your first time, it indeed finds the first 2 episodes that you don't have, and it downloads them onto your computer. From there, you can listen to them anytime. Now, please notice that I didn't say you have to listen to this on an iPod. It's a misnomer to think you need an iPod to enjoy a podcast. That media file you got from Joe is just like any other audio or video file on your computer, and you can watch it from there. Now, the good news is that most podcasters configure these files so you can play them on the iPod, and that's a big part of the benefit. So, now that you're subscribed, your computer will automatically check the control file for the Joe Show to see if there are any new episodes. If there's nothing new, nothing happens. And all of this goes on in the background on a periodic basis, so you don't have to do anything manually. Now, let's say a week passes and Joe has recorded the 3rd episode. He uploads his audio file to the Acme host as before, and the control file subsequently updates as well. When your computer checks the control file the next time, it notes that there is a new episode that you don't have, and it immediately downloads it for you. And that's how simple a podcast works. You, as the listener, let your computer keep you up to date on the shows you subscribe to, and Joe, as the producer, just needs to send his new files up to his host so you and anyone else in the world can get them. You have full control over the shows you want to get, and Joe has full control over the content he wants to provide. This simple method of distribution is the key to the coolness of podcasting.
Makes sense? Any questions?
From the Silicon Valley.
That's all right. So this is all about when Steve Jobs introduces podcasts. Like I said, Weiner and Adam Curry it was 2004 when they started working on it, but it was Steve Jobs that actually started to introduce podcasts, called it podcasts. A guy named Leo Laporte tried to change the name to netcasts, which never stuck. So this is a video. Hopefully you can hear it. This is him. It's actually pretty funny. Him actually, the day they released podcasting as a part of one of their presentations.
Adam Curry is one of the guys that invented podcasting. And he has a podcast called The Daily Source. Let me go ahead and subscribe to that. And we can go listen to his latest one. And just click on it.
I've actually had to restart the show 3 times. My Mac has been acting up like a motherfucker. I think it's something to do with the file system.
Okay.
How do you control, say, dirty stuff?
So anyway, there's that.
Adam Curry is one of the guys.
So does this all seem complicated to you? Let's break it down. So here's what you really need when it comes to podcasting, okay? A microphone, headphone, or earbuds. And why that is, and why you might want to consider actually making sure when you're on even Zoom that you're wearing earbuds, is because what happens is the sound comes out of your speaker in a delay and goes back into the microphone. So the person on the other side is hearing themselves about a second or possibly even 2 seconds later. And in podcasting, it really drives people crazy to hear that echo. And then a computer, audio editing software, and a hosting provider. I've been using Libsyn for 16 years. And I mentioned it elsewhere in the presentation, but if you use what has as a code when you check out, you'll get 30 days plus of free hosting. So as an example, today's the 6th of May, and if you pull the trigger on it today, you'd get all of the rest of May and all of June for free. So the microphones, there's a couple different microphones I recommend. Let's just talk about this. This is the Samsung Q2U. I'm saying it's about $80, but sometimes you can get it for 65. That, in fact, is the microphone that I'm using right now. And would you agree? It sounds marvelous. So anyway, that's one of the microphones. So now you're into it, like, let's just say $80, right? Now, I got to tell you that Shure just came out with a Shure MV7. Now, here's the thing about the MV7 that's awesome. Its big brother is the SM7B, $500. This one's $250, and it has USB cables, and it has this wonderful feature that actually you can set the microphone to be far or near to you. And what that means is you can be literally 2 feet away, set the microphone to far, and it will make it sound like you're right up close. You sound as good as like I am right now. But the thing that's amazing about it is that it completely deadens anything else in the room generally. We had one client that actually was podcasting with one of these microphones, the Samsung Q2U, in their office, and lots of hard surfaces, and we couldn't get rid of the echo. But as soon as we got the Shure MV7, the echo just went away. It's not picking up the echo at all. So the bottom line is, when it comes to editing, if you have this microphone, then you're going to spend a lot less time editing, or if you have somebody else do it, you're going to make them a whole lot happier. It's really, really a great microphone, and it makes you sound really good. There's several different audio settings as well. All right, so so earbuds, the MEE Audio M6, they're really, really great. A lot of people in video production actually use them too, because they're small and they fit behind the ear, and they have a hard wire, which means you can't see them because it sits. But these headphones I use, which I really love, are the Sony MDR 7506. Yeah, they're $100, but they are incredibly sweet. So if you're serious about doing audio editing, probably need to get something like this. So let's just say the microphone's 80, the earbuds are 20. You guys probably already have earbuds, right? You probably can just use what you have. When it comes to recording and editing, Audacity is kind of the standard, and I used Audacity for the first 14 years of my 16 plus years of producing podcasts. And then I started doing audiobooks and ended up using Adobe Audition at $20 a month, which you really don't need to use, although I really love the software. So Audacity is kind of the industry standard, but you can also, if you're on a Mac, you can use GarageBand. And in terms of the editing, what you're looking for is to take out a whole lot of people's ums and just what are called filler words to make it sound better. And I will tell you that we start a lot of our clients off with the Rodecaster Pro. It is $600, but it has 4 inputs. So if you have a studio, you know, you can actually have 4 microphones on it. It has this really wonderful feature where I can call somebody on a phone and it sounds really, really good. It gives you a whole lot of flexibility and power, and it makes podcasting really, really simple. So if it's in your budget, we highly recommend it. So I'm not going to put this into what does it cost to get started. So far we're at $100, $80 for the microphone and $20 for earbuds. But if you have earbuds, you're only into it $80. Now let's talk about remote recording. A lot of people, like I should say first, when you go to choose a microphone, that's something on our list that we talk about later when we get into what we call the design of the show. Because if you're going to be doing it, you're going to have to ask your studio, you're going to be doing solo by yourself? Are you going to have a co-host in the room? Are you going to have a co-host remote? Or are you going to be doing just remote interviews? Okay. So if you're going to be doing remote interviews, you'll see in a minute that don't use Zoom, because Zoom actually compresses the audio files and it really, really sounds pretty bad. But cleanfeed.net is free. And this is used by professionals all over the world. The free version is all you need. Professionals actually pay, I think, $25 a month, and then they get a whole lot of other features. But this would be all you would need for remote recording. We used to use Squadcast and quite frankly dumped them. They were having way too many problems, and I was looking for something that was really stable, and I started using Streamyard, and it's $0 to $25 a month. It records really high quality audio and video, and you can do live streaming on Facebook, LinkedIn, or a YouTube channel. So basically, since we started doing this for our own podcast, What Has My Attention, we're actually streaming live, and also the video ends up on YouTube, and the video and the audio actually ends up in our podcast page, which I'll show you a little bit later on. So those are the options. So far, you're still into it only $80 or $100 in terms of equipment. Yep. Let's talk about album artwork. So that's the other thing you're going to have to create. And we actually have a graphic brand designer that we work with who's really, really good. But you have to have some album artwork, and you want to pay attention to how it looks and how it communicates. In other words, when somebody's looking on their phone or whatever for a podcast on, I don't know, rock climbing, and there's like 3 or 4 different options, the first thing they're going to pop out to them is the image, the album artwork that appeals to them the most. So it's really important to sort of get this one right. I follow Simon Sinek. He's down on the bottom in blue, but you know what? He's great. I love him to death. And I can't really tell what this podcast is about. You have to be able to look at the album artwork and know what the podcast is about. And even that one that says audience, I still don't know what the podcast is about. Sounds Profitable above that with Brian. Yep, I know what that one's about. On Being Type Left, or Top Left, is with Krista Tippett, and it's one of the top podcasts I listen to. She is really, really well known. So On Being has worked really, really well for her. But if you're going to start out doing, creating album artwork, like I said, make it appealing, and so that when people see it, they know what it's about. Go Legal Yourself down there. That's one of our clients. And I've had Libsyn, the VP, one of the VPs at Libsyn, said it was like one of the best album artworks they'd ever seen. Mainly because you can look at it and tell what it's all about. You guys use Canva? See, everybody uses Canva. They're rocking it. Okay, so what is the cost? Let's just say it's up front $100. Whoops, I didn't want to go forward. So monthly, the other thing you're going to need, because Canva's free, is that you can't get a paid account. I actually have a paid account because I have a team and I have to share it with people. But we recommend Libsyn.com. I've been using them for 16 years, so almost 17. And the reason is they are the biggest in the industry. They are the oldest podcast media host provider ever. And the fact is that they have awesome relationships with everybody in the industry. So what's really important about podcasting is you want to be everywhere. So what does that mean? That means that it's great to be on Apple, which is by default, and Spotify and Google and some other places. But one thing that Libsyn does really well is their partnerships with Pandora, Spotify, and Ganya Radio in India is actually a new one. So what happens is when you're a part of Libsyn's, you're using Libsyn's technology and they add a destination, it's pretty much click a button and now your podcast is going to be there. So as an example, when Amazon released podcasts, I don't know if you know, but you can listen to podcasts on Audible now too. Then anyway, Libsyn was like months ahead of the game. And the day that Amazon said it's available, that showed up in Libsyn's panel. So we're going to talk about working towards a successful podcast and what does success look like for you? And I would really like to hear people chime in, like unmute yourself. What does success look like for you? Is it a paycheck and a title, or what is it? Okay, no one's chiming in. Sam, what does success mean to you?
Okay, success means successful communication with people, right? And it means connecting with people, and it's not just about a paycheck and a robotic existence. It's about connecting with people. It's about telling a story that's worth telling, right?
Uh-huh.
It's about getting a message out there and having that message received. Nothing's better. I mean, you see a movie that you love and you tell somebody about it, and it's just this wonderful sort of synergy that happens. Same thing with the book, same things with your favorite album, right? Your music. And then the podcast fits right in with that. Like, you have an idea, you want to share it with the world. You
Right.
have a business, you want to share it with the world. So I just think that that's what makes it successful, is that it
Yeah, that's good.
yeah.
So somebody here is saying financial freedom, being heard. And the parent company, by the way, for Imagine Podcasting is our company called Heard Not Seen Media. Although we're doing video streaming. Annie Barrett, do you have anything to say? Do you have what does success mean to you?
Oh, I like what some other people are putting in there. Yeah, I think for me, have a wellness business. So
Awesome.
I want to be able to offer something that will help people feel better and do better self-care and lead healthier lives, more vibrant lives. So for me, if I'm doing that, that's good. And in the end, if they become a client, that's great. But it's also just great to know that more people are taking good care of themselves.
Yeah. That's nice. Thank you. Is it Gisela? Did I pronounce your name right?
Yes, it's Gisela. Thank you.
Gisela. Gisela. I like that.
Yes, thank you. For me, success is satisfaction of feeling satisfied with my product.
Mhm.
And in my personal case, it's to know that I have reached where I want to go in communication, sending my message. Yeah.
And how would you know when you got there? How would you know if you're
with the feedback?
feedback?
Yes.
We're going to talk about podcast feedback a little bit later. Sam Tinsley, I'm going to call on you.
Just being able to share my experiences and information that I know with people and providing happiness for myself, I guess.
Nice. And Robin, I'm going to let everybody know. Robin says, success to me is being a position where I can empower others by providing access to resource and support to thrive. I really, really love that. Thank you. So for me, it's about helping as many people start podcasting as possible. Duh. So it's just a reminder that podcasting over time builds long-lasting relationships. And it really does. I mean, I've gotten to meet a whole lot of people I never thought I would be able to meet. And Sam now is going to take it away. And what you're actually looking at is a final copy of a podcast brand discovery document that we do for our clients, which is a single page that is foundational. And this is the foundation where everything else is created. Graphic design, the design of the podcast itself, episode design, the artwork, I think I mentioned, everything else. Sam, do you want to talk about that? And are we on a tight thing here, Robin? Tight time frame?
No, I mean, anyone, you're welcome to go over, and then if people have to drop off at 1, it's recorded, so we'll definitely share the recording.
All right, go ahead, Sam.
Well, this time I'll be succinct. How about that? Maybe that's my contribution at this point. Maybe I'll just shut up a little bit. So here it is. Here's what happens during brand discovery, right? Is the idea is to come away with just what you see here is one page, one piece of paper that you can give to anybody, and they'll understand what the podcast is all about, right? So you can give it out to friends of yours or people who are going to be potential guests, right? If you're looking for some kind of corporate sponsorship, or I don't know what, anything you need to do to in very short form communicate what they need to know in very broad strokes about the podcast, that's what we get to. But the process is that it requires interview, right? Several of them. I need to talk to you about what you want to accomplish, what you're currently doing, why you're doing it, and in these conversations that we have, you may not realize it, but there's DNA in the conversation, stuff that you're saying or not saying that it's like, oh, okay, I can use that. And over 1 or 2 interviews, this usually takes about 2, maybe 3 drafts to get it to where everybody is 100%, and we say, okay, done. But in that process, because I'm an objective observer, right? I don't know you. I don't know your business. I don't know who you are. I don't know anything yet, right? I'm a total blank slate. So what you tell me really counts. And so, and together, it's a process, it takes a couple of laps around the track, but together we discover really what would make the best podcast. So you see, like, there's a little bit of an intro here, but what is it really about? And it's about creating relationships, authentic conversations. You take this piece of paper, and all of a sudden, the graphic designer has a better idea of what the thing should look like, because that album artwork, I have to tell you, is a postage stamp, and it's got to read quickly, and it's teeny tiny, right? So how do you take this whole idea of what you want to do and condense it down into a postage stamp? How do you tell a potential guest, oh, I want you on my show? Well, what's it about? Well, guess what? That's in the piece of paper. So long and short of it is, because I know we're running short on time, but it's a really helpful process, because this document, as John said, becomes a foundation on which to build the house, right? Like, if you go down the road and you're like, oh, wait a minute, let's remember what the brief said, right? Let's remember what we all agreed on, and therefore you don't veer off the road too far. And I think that's really it. It gives you a solid foundation of something to build on, something that people understand, something that you can share, and something that really proves to be invaluable as the process goes. So,
yeah, that's it.
That's about it, I guess, right?
The other day we have a new client, and I hadn't seen them for a couple of weeks, and it was our first meeting designing the album artwork, and it kind of started to go astray, and I kind of had to remind everybody about this document, and it brought everybody right back. So it's important.
Exactly.
So thanks, Sam. Okay. So, and Sam, feel free to pipe in on this one, but here's the thing: is there's a lot of reasons why people want a podcast. I myself, I have so much fun. It's just a whole lot of fun doing it, but there are business reasons as well. So you know, you're creating value for other people. You're actually having a conversation. There's a woman that I'm really interested in producing a podcast for that has gone through tremendous abuse. And she is an incredible communicator and a woman on fire. Well, I am all about helping bring women's voices to be heard. So that is one reason to podcast. But you know, probably the biggest reason really is to get your brand and your message out there in a much, much bigger way. And along the lines, and along the way, I should say, is that you let people know about the offerings you have. You know, people are going to trust you over time. So with Elena, it was really about, she's very successful. I mean, she has a lot of clients and she just can't respond to everybody. So she created a podcast so that people could hear her on demand. She did, people, you know, her schedule's totally full. So it's just a really awesome way for people to be really plugged into what she has to say because she's just really great. Think Brene Brown. She's gone through everything Brene's ever done and she embodies it fully. So for Elena, was there anything else you wanted to add, Sam?
It's interesting, you know, there is a kind of a common theme, and that is that this is a fairly selfless space. You know what I mean? People do podcasts because they want to share. That even came up in the chat here. You know, I want to share what I have with other people. And in Elena's case, yeah, she's booked solid. She's too busy. She's trying to share more of herself and get it out there because there is a demand for it, right? So the same kind of, there's just a real, and I don't want to sound oofy goofy about it, but there is a real positive thing about, you know, this sort of selfless component to the storytelling that people often want to do, and it rebounds back. So that's my 2 cents.
And actually the reason I got started podcasting is when I found out about it. I hate writing, or I used to. You mean I can sit behind a microphone and just talk? And then I can actually bring somebody into my studio at the time and have a conversation with them. I don't have to write anything. Because in 2004, it was called audio blogging. In 2005, Steve Jobs named it podcasting. So, yeah, I started writing actually because I really wanted to learn, and I joined a writing group. All right, so. Previously, you know, I said Elena really wanted to be able to engage more with people. So let's talk about that. Hopefully you can see this. Can you see my screen? This is our What Has My Attention. And it's my podcast, but it's officially the Imagine Podcasting podcast. But here's the thing about what we do for clients, and you can do it too. This is really easy to set up, quite frankly. But it is a podcast page. And basically there's all the social. It makes it really easy for people to actually follow you. I don't know if you guys know, but the word subscribe's going away, and we're now talking about following a podcast because the word subscribe has been implying you got to pay for it to way too many people, which has kept them from really following or actually listening to podcasts. But then the other thing is that the reviews are here. It makes it really easy for people to see a review. It makes people really easy for people to actually leave a review. They could, of course, contact, but here's the real sweet thing is that there's a blue button down here in the bottom right. Do you see that? So people can actually leave a voice message as well, which is really cool. So it's interactive. Hey, Sam, I heard you talking the other day about da-da-da-da. I had a question. So you can get that recording and actually bring it into your podcast and say, hey, had a question from Sam, and here it is, and then play his question and then answer it. And I don't know if you guys know who Seth Godin is, but he does this all the time. So it really does become interactive. It's just time shifted. It's just not immediate. So anyway, let me see if there's anything else I wanted to show you here. I was going to suggest, actually, I think you might really enjoy this podcast with Lisa Pachance. So if you remember right, I told you I'm now doing video streaming and audio at the same time, recording everything and then doing it separately. So the video's here and then the audio is here. But of course the audio ends up on everyone's iPhone or whatever cell phone that they have. All right, so we'll get back to the document. Question time. I did such a great job. Nobody has any questions, right? I don't believe it. You guys get clear about what you need to start podcasting? Seriously, it's a good microphone, the $60 or $80 Samsung Q2U. You probably have headphones, but those little things, those earbuds that for $20 are really, really nice. And it's $5 a month with Libsyn to get started. And the first month plus is free. And I will tell you this. If you're interested in podcasting, just start. One of the questions, Robin's back. Let's not go there yet. The question is, how much time does it take? So for my podcast, it takes about 5 or maybe 6 hours a week. And that includes the conversation I'm having with somebody. Now, I've been doing this a while, so I'm pretty fast at it. There's many other tools we haven't even talked about. There's one called Descript. Have you heard of that, Descript? It basically allows you to take your audio into a system that transcribes it. On the top, you have what's been transcribed, and you can actually go into Descript and edit the text, like take out the ums, take out things that you don't want, and it gets taken out of the audio. And then you export the audio and all that editing using like GarageBand or Audacity or something you don't really need to use. So,
John, there's a question in the chat from Crystal.
Crystal. Money. Let's make some money podcasting. Is that it, Crystal? Where is she? She's Crystal Wright. Okay. All right. So we're getting ready to launch what's called dynamic ad insertion. So how do you make money podcasting? First of all, like anything else, you got to create really great content. And that may seem daunting, but here's what I say, is just be yourself and share what you're really passionate about. If you're going to do a podcast for your business, the last thing in the world you want to do is a podcast about your business. So Starbucks is a really good example. Years ago, they launched their podcast and all they talked about was their business. Trader Joe's, on the other hand, did the Trader Joe's podcast. And what did they podcast about? All the people in the field, all the people that are actually make Trader Joe's happen. Not the business, not the people, at the head of the helm, but the people that were actually making it happen, interviewing people in different parts of the world about where they source their stuff. Really interesting story and storytelling. So with the advent of advertising now on podcasts, it's going through the roof, like big time. So most of us think that probably there won't be too many podcasts that aren't monetized. Okay. And so Apple just released a way for podcasters to actually monetize their podcast through subscription services. Okay. I'm not going to talk about it because I'm still weighing in on it. But the other way a lot of podcasters make money, besides like Annie Barrett, you were talking about being a health coach. Okay. So write this one down. Go listen to Diabetes Connections. Okay, so Stacy Sims, a friend of mine, she got my attention because I was interested in diabetes and stuff, because I do a podcast called Alternative Health Tools. But I heard her say that she had been podcasting, she started 6 years ago, and less than a year into it, she got some sponsors for her show. So now she makes really good money by having those sponsors on her show, because so many people have diabetes, and she has a community where she educates people and brings on experts to talk about it and what's new and what to do about this, that, and the rest of it, how expensive, some of these drugs are and stuff like that. And she is totally there for the community. And the sponsors love it, because the sponsors basically could kind of care less about the show. They're more interested in the people that are listening. And so if you're serving the people that you're listening, then you can make really good money through sponsorship. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about this in more length. Simply by going out, you could even start a show if it was really well thought out. Before you even started the show, you could have sponsors. I'm serious. That's what I'm going to be doing with a couple different shows that I want to create, which is I'm going to go find some people that are in alignment with what the vision is. I told you about this woman that has experienced abuse for such a long time, and she's a freaking rock star, and it's going to be a great show. And I'm going to be looking for organizations, whether it's state, I just don't really know, to actually sponsor it, to get it out there. Why? Because we'll be using them, we'll be actually adding them into the show dynamically in terms of not so much advertising, but sponsorship, to just let people know that the show is possible because of the sponsorship of whatever organization it is. And the other thing about sponsorship is this, is that host-read ads do really, really well. Programmatical ads, where you've got somebody from, it's a bad example, but Casper Mattresses comes on with their own ad, do not do well at all. People have a tendency to just skip past that ad, or they'll actually stop the podcast. But you, as a podcaster, the new buzzword in the marketing world is that podcasters are influencers. I'm sure you've heard this thing about all these different people that are influencers, there's a lot of people out there that should have no business calling themselves influencers or even be tagged as one. But you as a podcaster, you have great influence over the people that are actually listening to your show. And trust me, you get somebody that's been listening to you every single week or every 2 weeks or whenever you decide to do it for 6 months, and you start talking about, I don't know, I used to have a crock-pot, but the crock-pot broke down, and now I have an Instapot, and I absolutely love it. There's that person out there that's going, got it. Their crock-pot broke down, and they're going to go out and get an Instapot. Does that make sense in terms of making money? And then if you've got online programs, and you're doing a show that people really love, you just say, hey, just want to let everybody know, it's in 2 weeks, we're, releasing our program titled whatever. And, if you sign up, whatever your marketing strategy is, but just let people know, because you have a relationship with them. And it takes time. And the reason I really encourage people to just get started, and your first episode's going to stink. It really is. Just be prepared. And you're going to go, I don't want to release it. You're going to have to release it. You're going to release you're just going to record an episode and release it and learn. You'll get better, record the episode, release it and learn. And you'll just get better and better and better. My voice you're hearing right now was not my voice when I first got started. And the reason my voice is the way it is now is because actually I just started podcasting and I started listening to myself. And then I could go, oh, I want to change it up, So we actually have a voice coach, somebody that's really, really good, used to work with Randy Jackson. And she's going to take everybody in the company through, in June, going to take everybody through a true voice session. I did a demo with her, two sessions is what she does, and she taught me so much. And a lot of it is just the range you have in your voice. Like Robin, it would be great to hear you scream. I don't know what it would be like, but it could be fun. So anyway, just getting your emotion out there and getting your voice out there and understanding that you have tremendous influence. And, instead of talking to just a few people, you could be like talking one-to-one with somebody with an earbud in their ears. This is not one-to-many, this is one-to-one. Tremendous influence in a very positive way, if you like. So, yeah, the money's there. People will pay. And, more and more people are actually going to subscription models. I mean, that's kind of where the money is, But the other way you can make money is start a Patreon. A lot of podcasters have Patreon. So they produce additional content. You chip in whatever you can to get additional content off Patreon. I don't know if you guys know who Sam Harris is. Sam Harris was very against advertising, and he went to a complete subscription model. So you're going to hear his incredible podcast every week or two, and at some point it starts to trail off. And he says, you still get an hour of the 2-hour podcast, but if this is trailing off, it's because you're not a subscriber. Go to, I think it's like $10 a month. So the revenue models are starting to really kind of unfold, and we're starting to see actually, there's many different ways to do it. So it's like Sam's heard me say before, this podcasting is like one of the most incredible creative spaces you can ever play in. Generally speaking, it's not video, which really, really keeps it really, really simple. I mean, seriously, you can sit in your bathrobe and do your podcast. I often do. So anyway, thanks for the question. You kind of got me started. All right. So any of you are welcome to go to our website, imaginepodcasting.com, and just schedule an exploratory call with me. There's, just 45 minutes. Because I suspect there's a whole lot of questions that probably you might have after seeing this or being here that you might have. So the other thing is I'm giving away a Samsung Q2U today. Hello. All right. So you got to do two things. Sign up at the website, imaginepodcasting.com. Go to the top left. It's Why We Podcast. Just click on that button. Yes, you're going to opt into our email list. But as I said before, we don't do a lot of emails. That could change, but I'm not going to be dumping 3 emails in your email box every day like some people do. And then go to whathasmyattention.com and leave us a voice message. That would be fun. And then you'll go into a drawing, and then I'll mix it up in a glass jar, however I figure out how to do it, and I'll pull a number and I'll get in contact with you. Oh, look at that, Virginia. No flies on Virginia. She already signed up. Good for you. So that's kind of the end. I just really wanted to thank once again everybody here that made this possible. Robin, you are awesome. And I really, really appreciate it. And so, anybody else have questions?
I had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious, what are ways that you guys, how do you understand your audience? Like, what are some ways that you can feel, like, when you're just starting out, what do you even talk about? Do you have a game plan for that?
Oh, yeah. Some things I want to mention about this. So usually people do have a burning desire to start a podcast. That's been my experience. They have a reason. They have a reason they think it could actually solve a problem. So for some reason I can't see everybody. It drives me crazy. But that's because you got us pinned. That's why. Okay, anyway, so to answer the question, there's several different processes we go through. So the first thing is always the brand discovery process, creating that one sheet that basically is, talks about the podcast. We have a name for the podcast. We have a subtitle generally, and 2 short paragraphs or a sentence and a paragraph that actually describe the podcast. That actually gets used when you're setting up the podcast. But it's the first 45-minute conversation with me. Just, go there and book a call with me. I usually take calls only on Wednesdays. And if it doesn't work for you, just email me and we'll set it up a different time. So there's that process. And then the next process really has to do with, okay, what's next? Probably the album artwork. But we also have somebody that is a podcast strategist who does the editing, and he is excellent. So what does that mean? Well, once, it's basically designing the episode and the content. They're often called, content editors or audio. They're not audio editors, they're content editors. So for Elena Armillo, as an example, Rye Taylor, our strategist, took some of the episodes that she had recorded. These were from videos that she had done last year, like 15 of them. And he actually moved things around and took out the reference to COVID so that it would be more evergreen, because I think when this whole thing's over with COVID is nobody wants to hear the word again, right? So there's that process. There's the episode design and that process, and then it's just set up, and then we have content writers. But Sam, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
It's interesting. Yeah, I want to jump in on that because it's a process of, you've heard the cliche refining fire, right? You know, your idea has to go through a process of refinement. And that's kind of what this is. You know, this happens when you're writing a book or screenplay or whatever it is. You know, other people's eyeballs get on it, and all of a sudden it becomes better, right? And it gets tighter, and it gets, so when you refine a precious metal, right, it goes through the refinement and all the impurities come out of it, right? But it doesn't happen right away, and you got to get it into the smelter a few times. Well, in Elena's case, you know, we met, we had our first conversation. I put a first draft together. No, right? She sent it to people who she trusts, and they came back and said, this is not you. What about the fact you're going to change the world? And I'm talking about, you know, wimpy stuff, and they wanted to be much more punched up. Okay, second draft. Then she showed it to her husband or her boyfriend, and he was like, well, wait a minute, you're not in this, right? And she's like, oh, you're right, because it was all business and it wasn't enough personal. So each draft, each step refines it, gets it tighter, makes it cleaner, makes it shine more, right? And then like, well, how are we going to do the poster art? You know, the album art, same process. And so the team and this evolution that the idea goes through, it makes the podcast better. And that's even before, you know, it's even out there, right? I mean, John mentioned Rye. She had all this stuff. He shell gamed it around so that it's now a compelling story, because it just kind of rambled on and it just sort of, it wasn't structured. But now he shell gamed it. Now it's tighter. Now the COVID crap is out. All of a sudden it's been refined, right? So each process, each step of each process is a refinement process, if that makes sense, I hope. But that's kind of the idea.
And once again, it's about, it's coming up with a very compelling story. And so when you think about the brand document, the theme, you've got to have a theme for your podcast. And then you can it's like all good branding is that message needs to be inherent in every episode. And then you'll have season 1, which might be a theme, a sub-theme of the main brand. And then season 2, season 3. Like I said, it's really creative process. But honestly, the whole thing starts with that 45-minute exploratory call to see, quite frankly, if we're a good fit. And if for whatever reason it's not a good fit, I'll certainly, you know, do whatever I can to get somebody in touch with the right people. Although, quite frankly, I don't ever have any bad fits.
One last thing I wanted to add too is one of the intimidation factors is we all think a podcast has to be an hour long, right? But it doesn't. No. It can be short. And that was a great relief to a couple of the clients who were like, oh, thank God, because I don't know what to talk about for a full hour. Right? You know, like I'm just getting started. How am I going to fill that time? It doesn't have to be the full hour. It can be short, and short is sweet, and short is much more impactful, and it will give you confidence, right? Because we need success in order to feel confident. And when we're confident, we're more successful. And so these things kind of step by step, you know, together. So I just want to throw that in there because I think.
Yeah. One of my favorite podcasts is called Marketplace Tech, right? So, you know, they do, you know, it's like 7 or 8 minutes long, Monday through Friday, done by Molly Woods at American Public Media, I think is what it is. 7 minutes. Everybody's got time for 7 minutes. Every day I get a notification of a new podcast of the 15 I listen to. And that one's always on top. And I always have 7 minutes to listen to it. So it's the message. It's the impact you want to make. You know, just once again, I'm going to take it back to just realize you're talking to somebody one-on-one. Most of the time, people are listening to it in their earbuds of some sort. Was that helpful? And Tracy Ortega, yes, you can just leave me a voicemail. Just reference that you heard a email. Just reference that, you know, this particular webinar. Yep, she doesn't have a microphone. I think she needs one, don't you?
Well, thank you so much. That was super helpful. I feel like we probably need like a part 2 for this because we could just keep going.
Okay, let's do that. Next week is fine with me. So what would you want to, what would part 2 be? And everybody should chime in if they want chat or not. What else, what would part 2 be?
Yeah, if anyone has any suggestions or, bullet points, drop them in the chat. I feel like we could talk, let's see.
Content creation.
For sure.
I love content creation. Okay, good. What have you learned to not do and things you have learned that work? I'll tell you this, keep it simple. Stop cruising the internet and take advice from people that have been podcasting for 6 months and quite frankly just don't have enough experience. I mean, I'm just going to say that part of the reason I dumped Squadcast is because they're very popular, they're doing really well, and wow, got some major problems. And part of the reason I'm with Libsyn is that, they've been around since 2004. Tremendous experience. I think experience makes difference. Yeah, just keep it simple. Just keep it simple. Like I said, it's work 80% of your time on content. Seriously. But yeah, okay, so we could do another one. Content creation. Yeah, that would be fun. I know some really, besides Sam, I know some really good people.
Awesome. Well, I just took notes of all of the suggestions, so we'll have them. And again, thank you so much, everyone who was here. Thanks, John. Thanks, Sam. That was great.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having us. I mean, sincerely.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Great fun.
Kind of making my month. I mean, there is a bit left in the month, but so far. All right, everyone. Good luck. Good luck on the drawing. And whoever the winner is, I'll reach out to you for your address and we'll go from there. And by the way, what I was going to say, I didn't say earlier is, yes, I have a box, a Samsung Q2U box for you. It doesn't have a microphone in it, but I will send you the box. But that's not very nice of me, which I won't do.
Well, thanks so much for that opportunity. And we'll see everyone next time.
All right.
Have a great afternoon. Bye.